is okay. So I guess we can go ahead and yeah, get started. So yes, hello. We are going to be reviewing a game called House on the Hill. So for a little backstory, Zach and I played this and Zach watched, and I was recording and intending to make a playthrough of the whole video. And since it was in early access and the developers had an email attached to the title screen, my intention was to make the video, upload it, and if we had any criticisms, I will grab the link, put the link in an email and say, here's our thoughts. If we had if it seems like we're being hard on it, it's because we care. But funny thing, after our 4.5-hour recording session concluded, I discovered that the entirety of the Discord audio did not get recorded, so you couldn't hear Zach at all.
Yeah.
So, and technical difficulties, but
yeah, it was bad.
But we had a lot of criticisms of the game, and I was not willing to let anything that we had go unsaid. So instead, here we are.
Yeah.
It's a lovely time. So I guess to start is I played this on November 3rd, and I played it again to collect extra gameplay on November 5th. These dates are important. I'm willing to forgive gameplay mechanics for early access games because obviously they aren't finished yet. Go ahead.
I was just gonna agree. Yeah, those kinds of things are fun in early access.
Mm-hmm. But there's a little bit of an asterisk to that. I'm more willing to forgive a game that's, let's say, an early access demo, rather than one that you have to pay for. What was it called? The Shore does exactly that. It's in early access. I don't remember what stage it was in when the demo got released, but all you can play right now is a demo, and the mechanics are they can use a little bit of fleshing out, but that's completely fine. This, however, I looked on Steam and it entered its final product on November 10th. So this game is now fully released, which kind of changes my my willingness to be forgiving for a lot of stuff, because it was not, but from my point of view, it wasn't ready to be fully released.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I went back to see if anything changed. Not much did. There was an addition to one of the runs that we'll go over, and there was Norse writing that would flash in my vision in another section. But other than that, there was nothing. So our criticisms don't change at all. And those two statements will make a lot more sense as we move forward. Before we get into the real critiques, I do have things to report, because there were some things that I wanted to kind of clarify, because I was a little bit confused after we played through it. So I just went back and I just speed run the entire thing. I went through it until I perfected it, which isn't difficult. There's only 11 achievements. funny thing, on the Steam reviews, the longest amount of time played that I saw was 3.5 hours. I have 9.2. So I like to think I gave myself a little bit extra time to kind of, make sure. And I read the product description. It said, did I read the product description when we played through? I don't remember.
I believe you did. I think you did at the start.
Okay, so for
because you pitched what we were going to review, and it was that or something else. I think it was that or like Resident Evil or whatever, and we decided to do that first.
Okay, so I guess for the 3 here, it'd be beneficial to read out the product description of the thing that we're going to be reviewing. So product description is just the it's not a summary, is it?
A summary of the game? No, because the fucking summary game we would have known we were getting into. Although we clearly did not.
Yeah, I kind of forgot to read that one, but not that it would help. But the product description is each choice can open a new mystery of the house and lead to a unique walkthrough and ending. Uncover the final secret of the house. Uncover your own secrets. And the part that I probably should have read as well was the about the game section. And the about the game section says, House on the Hill is a first-person story-driven horror game which gives you the choice of your own nightmare. You play as a young thief with a struggling family. Your partner convinced you to take the final job and steal a rare jewel from an old mansion. Getting inside wasn't easy, but it will be even harder to get out because the house will not let you go. There are nightmares inside. Each attempt to break free leads to a new story and a new ending. After each terrifying experience, a foggy evening will return and you'll go inside once again. The secrets of the mansion are open to those who are ready to plunge into the madness. Uncover secrets of the house, uncover secrets of your partner, uncover your own secrets. And it has, and in these little split sections here, each walkthrough is unique. The mansion is open for you to explore. 5 stories, 5 nightmares, and it has the what awaits you, which says discover all secrets that are hidden behind the old walls of this gloomy house. Each walkthrough is unique and leads to its own story and ending. An intriguing story full of drama and horror. Huge Victorian estate open for exploration. Riddles and puzzles that guard the hidden passages and secrets of the house. Non-linear walkthrough. Explore the house the way you want.
And, it's not at all how the game plays.
No, it's not. So the unique walkthroughs that are being referred to is the diamond, the necklace, the knife, the narrator, and the narrator's backstory. And as far as them being non-linear, this is misleading. The only non-linear aspect to this setup is that you can play the first 3 out of order, but they're still the exact same levels. You're just playing them out of order. It doesn't affect anything. The open exploration becomes more and more restricted as you complete each level. So if you go after the necklace first, you can't go back up the stairs. Remember when we got the diamond first, and then we went back through and I tried to go the same route, but it just turned me around?
Yeah.
That's what happens every time with each section as you complete it. So
yeah, it's a funnel.
Yeah.
You know, it starts off wide and then it continues to narrow down until you're forced onto the main path.
Yeah, so it's still very much an on the rails experience. The nature of evil will change depending on what you decide to pay attention to. This is just not true. The exact same thing happens every time. Not necessarily on each individual section, but from start to finish, as you start the game, it's going to be the same thing every single time. It doesn't change just depending on what you pay attention to. It doesn't change based on the choices that you make. It doesn't do any of that. The next time you can explore another part of the house or even try to escape before you even step on its territory, sure, you can, but it doesn't do anything. Like 90% of the choices that you can make, it doesn't affect anything, even in terms of gameplay, because it just returns you to the gate. So what it's talking about is before we started the very first run through to get the diamond, we were at the gate. You can turn around and leave, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't even punish you for trying to leave. It just says, nope, you can't do that. Back to the gate. Nothing else happens.
Yeah.
Okay, can I go backwards and leave?
Hey, where did you go? We have an agreement.
Okay, well, there's one choice that I can't make.
Really? We don't have time for this. Go into the house.
No. Oh, look at that.
No, this is not how it would end.
Okay. Oh, come on.
Hey, where did you go? We have an agreement.
Well, that wasn't an ending.
Really? We don't have time for this. Go into the house.
I'm leaving. I am leaving.
No, this is not how it would end.
Okay. Cool. The riddles and puzzles that guard hidden passages and secrets. Throughout my playthroughs, I can confidently say there are only two puzzles. One of them was a riddle. It was combination to the safe. But and the other was the chess pieces to match to the paintings. But that was it.
Yeah. It's so bad because it's just like, okay, the safe one was fine, I guess. It wasn't hard or anything. It was just kind of like, okay, we'll fucking just do this. The other puzzle, though, the chess pieces or whatever, that was just so. It's just so stupid because it doesn't even let you solve the puzzle. You get in there in the room, and the narrator immediately just interrupts as soon as you enter the room and tells you how to solve the puzzle.
These chess pieces look kind of strange. Maybe you can use them. The holes under the pictures look like keyholes. Try to put the pieces inside.
Okay, great. Well, thanks. Don't let me think for myself. Don't let me figure it out. I didn't want to play the game. I just wanted to, just press W key and let you do it for me.
Yeah. And yeah, those were the only two. And yeah, I guess the riddle was okay, but it could have been a little bit more difficult. Then again, difficulty seems to be a fever dream here.
Yeah.
There's a Steam review left by one of the users. I will put a screenshot of it in the chat because it's too long to read. Hush, computer. But there's like one or two things that I didn't fully agree with, but overall I agree with the majority of what it had to say, so you can look at it if you want to. It is not necessary because this is our review. But okay, and that's all that I have new to report in terms of our critiques. So now we can get on to what we had prepared.
All right, let me pull my notes here. All right, game bad. Yep, that's it. That's what I got. Actually, though, I mean, I see what they were trying to do. Like, I can kind of see the vision, but oh man, that is just like so many just like missed opportunities and poor execution throughout the entire game. I mean, like I already said, telling the player how to solve a puzzle before they even have a chance at trying to solve it, come the fuck on. I mean, there's no excuse for it. I mean, there's a way you can handle it, and the way I prefer games to handle it is, you enter the room, and then there's a timer once you enter the room. And it's a timer the player can't see. It's a timer that exists purely within the game's code and all that. Once that timer ends, the game offers to give you a hint, and then a button prompt to get the hint. That way, if you don't want any hints, you don't have to have any hints, and you can just work on the puzzle yourself. But if you get to a point that you need a hint, you have the option. And that's not hard to do. It's very easy to do, and there are quite a few games now that do it. But even then, even if you don't want to do that, just put a timer in there and then have the hint automatically show up after the timer. This game is like you step in the room, you have barely enough time to actually see what's going on in the room, and the game tells you how to solve it. It's like, sure, I guess, thanks. Fucking... It's no fun when it happens that way. And it's just kind of like the mood throughout the entire just game in general. It's either it's like hand-holdy at its worst, or just bland at its best. I think there was really only like one or two sections that were actually kind of like stressful from like a horror game standpoint. And even then we were like both just taken out of it because of just poor execution and how like by the numbers it was designed. Because like there was some like the dungeon section of the game has a good atmosphere and stuff. It's spooky down there. It's like the first actual spooky part of the game, unless you're fucking terrified of ghosts. And even then it was just like all of like the what were supposed to be scares and stuff were just typical. Like nothing about him was surprising. It's like, go down this hallway. Oh, you know the monster is back down the hallway around the corner. Sure enough, you go down there, and there's the monster. Ooh.
Like, not even that.
And that's just kind of how the entire game is.
Yeah, that entire section, like you said, was probably its strongest, aside from the necklace. My vote for the strongest section was the necklace, just from detail execution. But we'll get into that. The dungeon, as nonsensical as it was from a story standpoint, because you're randomly thrown into this dungeon that's under the mansion, and there's this existential Lovecraftian being now chasing you.
It's not even the fun kind of dungeon. It's just this fucking like medieval fucking boring place.
Yeah, the entire time, you and I were convinced that we were hearing something behind us, like there were extra footsteps, and it didn't do anything with it. There was a section where I was convinced that the monster was around the corner. I was expecting it to be around the corner. It wasn't. And then I get into the room where he's actually around the corner, and I wouldn't say that my suspension was worn out, but I was already expecting it too much. And and sure enough, you see this shadow, and it's like, yeah, I knew it. And then you have to like get up so close to the corner. It's like, are you trying to make me die, or how slow are you going to have this monster move?
Yeah. And that was really the big issue with the sections that did actually contain the monster. It was just like all the build up to it was just, it was dragged out for too long. You reach like a peak at a certain point of where tension's like the ideal point to have the scare, and then they don't deliver on it, and then you kind of plateau in dread, and then you just fall off, because now it's like, you know, the jump is going to happen at any point now because it's way overdue. And so you've just like, you've gotten to the point where your brain is essentially like burned out on the tension, so you just stop caring, because you know it's coming any second, and it's like, it's stopped being scary at that point. And there's like, there are right ways to drag out tension for that long. You can do it, but their execution was too lackluster in that regard, because you have to continue to expand upon that sense of danger as you build that tension, because like you said, we heard the footsteps, but we never saw anything. You know, we never had any indication that there was something there. And at a point we were like, are those actually footsteps? So we like stopped moving, we listened to the game, and like the noise stopped. As soon as we started walking, it was happening again. It's like, okay, yeah, it's footsteps. There's something following us. And we're looking around, and there's nothing down there. So we already know it's just a sound effect that's just playing. And that is creepy. It does add to the vibe. But then we turn around and we go further into the dungeon, and it just continues to just have the atmosphere. There's nothing building upon it. Then we finally get to the point where we think we're going to get jumped, and there's still nothing. And there's just nothing new being added. It's just the same tension. So it gets dull, and it just eventually just stops being tense. It just becomes standard. And you can't do that. Like, if you're building tension, you have to like continually like raise the tension. That's why if you're watching like a thriller or horror movie or whatever, and it's like, oh, there's, you can hear the killer in the house, and the person is like hiding in the closet or whatever, and you hear the footsteps downstairs, and then you can hear them coming up the stairs. Maybe the camera like cuts to like the stairway, and you can see their feet, and like they're coming closer and closer. The noise is getting louder, and there's this gradual building, and then you hear them come into the room, and then you hear the door handle turning, all that. Like, there's that build-up happening there. Even though the scare is coming, the constant build-up is not letting your tension plateau. Your tension just keeps rising and rising and rising until it finally pops with the scare or whatever. And the game just doesn't do that at all throughout the entire experience. Mechanically speaking, as far as just like the core gameplay loop, there's nothing like terribly wrong about the game in just a gamist perspective. Sure, you have the whole thing of it's more of an experience than a game, because there's not really a lot in the way of mechanics to interact with. There's just a lot of walking around, and there is some interesting mechanics that are typically only limited to particular sections of the game. So, like, there's the one segment where I won't call it a boss fight, because it's really not. It's just this really, I don't know, it's like this interaction with a ghost, and you have the photo camera, and you're moving through the dark, and you're using the camera to see and reveal stuff. And that was cool, but it only exists within that section of the game, and it stops existing at any other part. And this is part of the issue with the greater design of the game, of dividing it up into like 3 sections until you get to like the last 2 segments of the game. It's like, as it was mentioned, you have like the 3 segments of exploring the mansion, and then you go into the later segments of the game, which are all linear. And because they made each of those sections modular, the camera mechanic from the one section of the game doesn't get to do anything in the other segments of the game. Because what if somebody tries to do one section and they haven't done the camera section yet? Well, they don't have the camera and they can't use it. So you'd have to design around that. And they clearly didn't want to deal with that. So the camera only exists for that section of the game. And that's just no fun, really. Because it was a cool mechanic and they just didn't really utilize it. And I think it was the coolest mechanic in the entire game. Just kind of a throwaway. But I mean, aside from that, game mechanic wise, there's really not much anything going on. You can sprint, you walk around, you occasionally interact. You do a lot of interacting with stuff, but it's like click on this thing, get information, or like move this thing or whatever. And then that's pretty much it. Other than that, you're just running from whatever monsters show up. And some of like the sections running from the monsters are kind of neat, because they have this weird thing where you're running down one hallway, a monster shows up, and you turn around and you're suddenly running down a different hallway, which is cool. But you're still on that linear path. The only way to like fuck up essentially is to not play and just like stand there essentially. So there's, in my opinion, very little game present, because you're pretty much on the rails for the entire thing. It's very hard to like lose essentially, or to have like a death condition or anything like that, unless you just like intentionally do it, or you're a toddler. So I could talk about it till the cows come home, but that's kind of the glaring issue. Is they wanted to design a game that was, as I said in the description, they wanted it to be open to explore and your choices matter and everything, but none of that makes it into the game. And it's really just linear. It's just a linear experience, without really much in the way of actual game. Yeah, like I can't think of anything like specific. Oh well, so there's the one issue I remember now. I forgot to note it down, but like the fucking what was it? There was like the weird interactions for like getting into the mansion, because you like a reset or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You have to like enter the mansion again. There was one where it was like, I can't remember which one it was, but it was like, what was the point of that?
The interactions that you had to do was to cut the wires. You had to find a key to unlock the front door. You had to climb through the window. And then the last interaction that you had available was that the door was already broken down.
It's like, oh, if you're going in on the assumption of being like, oh yeah, I'm going to have like a bunch of choices to make in this game and stuff. And under all that, like it would be cool. Because how you'd enter could potentially affect things. But because the game is nothing like that, it's just like, why is this here?
I think
it's just like felt like window dressing, really, because it's also not a choice. It's just you have to do it this way. And of course, the details of the house for how to get in changes. So there's like minor details about the house that changes every time you get set back.
Mm-hmm.
But it was stuff like that where it was meaningless. It didn't matter. As I said, it's just window dressing. There's no. It doesn't matter whether you entered the house with a key or whether like you hacked the security system or whatever the thing was. It seemed like kind of like a holdover from a previous design iteration of what they had hoped the game to be. And they just didn't get rid of it. But yeah, there was just some stuff throughout the game that was kind of like that, of like, why is this even here? It doesn't add anything to the game. It's just a meaningless, you have to interact with it to move on. And some of it is like, to less degrees and greater degrees of like, this doesn't need to be here.
Yeah, so I was going to say the mechanic of running down the hallways, you're having the monster chase you. You turn around while the monster is chasing you, and then he appears in a different location, so you have to turn around again. I was going to say that mechanic was cool the first few times that it used it, but then it kept using it.
Yeah. It just becomes the de facto way of getting away from the monster.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're already like confused about what even is going on, it just gets even more confusing. And it's just like, what the fuck? I mean, it's definitely a more entertaining way than just being like, okay, you run down the hallway. But at the same time, yeah, it just got exhausting after a certain point where it lost its impact. Because it really boiled down to run from point A to point B, run from point B to A, run back from A to B, and then progress. And it was just kind of like, doesn't need to be here. A cool like way to keep that would be to make it be player controlled, I think, but I know that's not on theme for what this game is. But having it be player controlled of like shifting realities or whatever, that would be cool. Like Titanfall 2, great example of this. Player gets this fucking, like, I don't want to call it a watch. It's a device that straps around your wrist. And you use it to flip between two periods of time, present and, like, past. And there's a specific, like, timeline in the past that you're jumping to. And you're running through this facility, jumping back and forth between the present and the past. And there's hostile enemies on both sides. And so, yeah, you get total control over how much you're switching. Like, yes, there's linear points where you have to switch to progress, but it's not always clear when you have to switch immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you like have to take a second and be like, wait, what's going on in here? And then there's like a room of enemies aggroing on you, so it's like, go back. And then you pop back to present, and it's like, oh, there's wild animals in here. So then you start fighting the wild animals, and now you're suddenly like time jumping between these 2 points in time, fighting two different groups of things while trying to progress through this building. It's really cool, even though it's a linear experience. It's really fun because you're in control of it on your terms. Rather than just, I'm going to run down this hallway, I'm going to flip, like, it's going to flip on its own, and then I run back, and then it flips on its own again, and then I run back. That's dreadfully boring. And there are cool things with how Titanfall 2 uses that, because a lot of that, Titanfall 2 is using the environment to move around. So you combine that with the elements of time traveling, and it's really cool. Giving that kind of control to a player can be really fun. Granted, I know it's significantly more work than what went into this game. But it's just an example of like how a cool idea doesn't how a cool idea can be made to not translate well. Because like while the idea of the shifting hallways is cool, it just stops being fun after a certain point because you don't get to control it or interact with it. It's just a side effect of running away from the monster.
Yeah. It'll probably be quicker to address the main elephant in the room. Why? There happens to be 4 apparent different genres crammed into one game. Because narratively, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have a ghost story in one section and then immediately after have your full Lovecraftian knowledge breakdown in the basement happen in the next section. It continues on with that what you were saying of why was it there.
Yeah, so like that's kind of the thing. It's like when because you can mix themes, it can happen, but the thing is like the different horror themes and stuff are their own themes for a reason. While they can mix, they don't always mix well. And that's why execution matters a lot. So like, yeah, that first section of the game we did was ghost stuff. If you're not afraid of ghosts or whatever, it's going to be fucking boring. And it doesn't help that it's really formulaic in the scares that it does. I mean, you have shit being moved across rooms, strange noises, ghostly apparitions across the room from you. You get locked in a room at one point, and there's like a bunch of noise in the room next to you as like shit's getting thrown around, and it's like you never have the sense you're in danger. Mm-hmm. And like there's a couple things in there that will get like a jump scare out of you, but let's be real, jump scares are very easy to execute. It's not impressive to be jump scared unless it's like a genuinely fucking scary thing. And so you have like this whole ghost theme, and they're like building the story a little bit of this situation involving this ghost, and you're getting like some of the clues to piece it together. But before you've gotten all of the pieces, the game completely shifts gears on you. And the story changes. And now all that ghost stuff is irrelevant. And it just shifts gears into this like Lovecraftian horror thing where you have this And it's also like part creature feature at the same time, except it's not actually a creature feature because you don't learn anything about the creature. It's just this fucking monster thing that you really don't like to look at. But the other aspects accompanying it is Lovecraftian horror. And while you can have that kind of creature feature in Lovecraftian horror, it's not the same. Because the big thing with a creature feature horror story is that you learn about the creature during the story, to some extent. You may not learn everything there is to know about it, but you do get information about it, so you have a greater understanding. Because typically in a creature feature, the heroes of the story have to beat the creature so they can survive, or at least learn enough about it so they can get away from it and escape. And that's just the typical formula for a creature feature. Lovecraftian creatures, you're not supposed to learn about them. They're just supposed to be weird and alien and beyond comprehension. And that's what makes them scary, because they don't operate in ways we could understand in any real sense. And then you combine that with like some of the existential like horror that's kind of there, but it was pretty like low effort. They were trying to do Lovecraftian horror with the focus on like the aesthetic of like gross monsters that shouldn't exist, but they completely missed the existential dread that is Lovecraftian horror. That's what it's really about. And none of it paired with the ghost stuff going on. The realm of the undead and spirits from beyond had nothing to do and no interaction with what limited Lovecraftian horror did exist in the game. So you have these two themes that are fighting each other because you're sitting here trying to make sense of, okay, what does the ghost stuff have to do with the Lovecraftian horror stuff? And you're trying to make the mental gymnastics to get that to connect, and it doesn't ever at all. And then it like changes gear to like this guy's like personal horror story of his life just like not going how he wants it to go.
Yeah.
And it doesn't connect with the other things other than, is it in his head? Is it a story he's writing? Like, what does it have to do with anything? All these themes are conflicting with each other, and they don't make any sense. It would have been better if they just picked one thing and focused on that, and made that the thing, rather than this weird mix.
Yeah, I will say for the Lovecraftian bit, the most that you learn about the creature is that for whatever reason the mother and the father that were living in the mansion were performing this demonic ritual to get their son back, and instead this creature that spawned in this spider cocoon thing emerged instead, and it tried to make a connection to a brain, a heart, and a liver, but it never not expanded. It never said why that was important for this creature, and then at the end of that section, the narrator or your partner is telling you, I had to do something, it needed a heart, and you just go through this portal, and you don't know what it was that the narrator or your partner was doing on the other side, because you can't see him, you can't see his perspective. So for all you know, he did fuck all. And it just leaves you questioning, what just happened? And it's not in a creepy or a scary way. it's more confusing, which kind of breaks the tension of horror for me.
Yeah. You end up just like having to just take this thing and like run it from one point to another point while the monster's chasing you. And it's just like, so all this confusing stuff's happening. And then you just have this really weird chase going on. And it's just weird. And then they try to flip it on its head and be like, oh, this is all your fault. You did this. Or like, this is a thing of your own creation or imagining or whatever. And they like try to play it off like the character that you're playing as has fever dreamed this up as a way of dealing with their guilt or something.
Yeah.
And then that almost immediately is thrown out the window. And it's just like, it's just a huge case of whiplash.
Yeah, because what was it? Because the story that the narrator was blaming you for was that you there was a thief that was going through a house, and by morning the house was burning down with a family inside. But from my perspective, and based on everything that happened within the game, for all I know, that was some other schmuck. That wasn't me.
Well, yeah, and it doesn't, and that's kind of the issue, is it's like the narrator is so unreliable, and that's what it's called in writing. It's an unreliable narrator. It gets to the point where you can't trust anything the narrator says, because it's everything that's brought up is countered or dismissed throughout various points in the game. So it's like you can't even trust the narrator, who is like your main source of information for understanding what's going on. And the stuff the narrator doesn't tell you that you interact with in the game world aren't trustworthy either, because like most of the ghost story comes from like reading snippets of like papers and stuff like that. And the ghost story has nothing to do with anything in the rest of the game.
Mm-hmm. And the story of the thief's guilt, or your player's guilt, it doesn't match up with the events that take place throughout the story of the game, because you have a family that tore itself apart, and you have this Lovecraftian existential thing of the two parents trying to get their son back, which tells you that the child was already dead, but the parents were still alive. So the whole family burning in the fire doesn't add up. So that can't be it. And in the ghost section, you have the father and the mother, too, are, I guess, equally disturbed. And the child is the victim. And I guess the mother is the one who turned into the ghost. But even that isn't followed up, because you're not told what happened to the father. So he could possibly still be alive. So that doesn't add up. And it wasn't even a fire in there. It was just the individual, so that doesn't add up. It's these constantly conflicting stories that makes this whole project kind of crumble on itself, because too many things don't add up and they don't make sense for them to follow any kind of logical pattern.
Trying to like print my dog barking. It's not working out too well.
I've noticed he wants to be in the video too.
He's got an attitude. He's probably wants to play, and the other dog is too old and doesn't want to put up with this shit. So, yeah, the game's all over the place. It has no idea what it wants to be, and then thus is turned itself into this really weird linear story experience thing that doesn't really have a clear, decided story. It's just this chaotic mess. And then at the end, it gives you a choice that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, it gives you a choice that you can make, and then you don't see the outcome of that choice, so it doesn't matter. It's just so fucking weird. It would help if they actually, like, had just picked something to focus on and made that the game. They made a big deal about being in this house on the hill or whatever, and then, like, spent, like, I want to say, like, only around half of the game actually in the mansion. Because there's a good portion of the game, like, you're in other locations that, in a sense, are part of the house, kind of, technically, if you are willing to accept that there's a medieval dungeon underneath this mansion, and then, like, a entire ass cave system, and then, like, this weird dreamscape type place. I don't know. It's all over the place. And it really needed focus.
Yeah.
Because, like, the final portion of the story has nothing to do with all the story that, before it. You have this, like, writer guy who's, like, struggling to pay his bills and stuff and take care of his family, and he's, like, alienated himself from his family because he's trying to, write the big seller or whatever. And he refuses to go to his dad for money because he thinks he's going to be abused by his father or whatever. Like, or his family is going to be, like, abused by his father. And it's like, none of this mattered, 5 minutes ago. None of this was relevant at all up until this point. Nothing before this had anything to do with this. And it's like, sure, you could say all this stuff up to this point was the story he was writing, but if it was the story he was writing, none of that makes sense because it's so self-contradictory.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, well, it's like different stories he was writing. Then it's like, okay, but why are we experiencing them in a linear fashion? It's so poorly executed. It could have been potential, but it was just not handled well.
Yeah. So the majority of my criticisms were focused on the chess puzzle portion, obviously, and the I guess it was sort of the morality choice at the very end of the game. I'm willing to overlook typos and misspellings and incorrect grammar. While it was in early access, now that it's released, all of my willingness to overlook has been exhausted. Because if it enters a final stage, then that stuff should be taken care of. I can understand one or two slipping through the cracks because we're human. It happens. But if there's too many, then that becomes a problem. But yeah, for the puzzle portion, I will say, in the final product, the length of time between you entering the room and it telling you the answer has been extended, but it still tells you. And I think the only reason why I thought that it was extended is because I already knew the solution. I think they would have benefited from playing through, or at least looking at the Mist or the Room series in particular, because noting the dynamic of mist. Mist does not hold your hand. It is extremely hard in that you are not given obvious hints about a puzzle. If you want a better idea of having a hint system, then looking at the room would be the better option, because the room will allow you to use 2 hints through each section. So there's one action that you have to complete to progress through the puzzle box that you're running through, and every time you make an action, the number of hints resets. So if you use 2 hints and you put in a coin that unlocks a certain section that pops out a camera, then those 2 hints are reset and you can use 2 hints again, but it only limits you to 2. If you need to exceed 2, then maybe you should look up a walkthrough. But yeah, not giving players the time to think about the puzzle that's in front of them and having your partner outright tell you what it is, it no longer becomes a puzzle, because a viable solution is to just stand there and wait for your partner to tell you what to do. That veers from a puzzle to back to an on the rails experience of you're just stuck in a room, partner on the other end, help me because I can't figure this out. You didn't even let me fail. I didn't have time to fail. And I even in the sense of failing, that you put the wrong chess piece with the wrong picture, you can't. If it's the wrong chess piece, then it doesn't fit with the picture. So either way, you're given the solution, whether your partner tells it to you or not. The morality choice. You have to choose between going with your wife or going back to writing your book to save your family from a financial situation. For making choices like that, I would direct you to Soma, to looking at the game Soma by Fictional Games. There are multiple choices that you have to make throughout that game, and the obvious or the morally correct solution is not obvious. And if you, the way the choices are set up is, if it's your first time playing, if your first experience with Soma is playing it, then the gravity of the effects that choice makes really starts to hit you because of how they are set up and what those, because you can see the outcome of those choices too. Like you said, the choice doesn't matter because you don't see the outcome. With choices like that, it is important that you have the player see what the outcome is, because it adds for a payoff. If you don't have a payoff, then there's no point to having a choice like that.
Yeah.
The ghost section that you were talking about, I still stand by saying that it was its strongest section because of what it had in it. Like you said with the camera, the mechanic of having the camera as your light and only having it as a flash so the light goes away, that is interesting. Before that, the camera you could take a picture of an outline, and while it's just a blank wall with an outline drawn in chalk, if you take a picture of it, it becomes real. And that part would have been more interesting if the narrator could just not talk for 5 seconds. And if you took a picture of the paintings throughout the house, the paintings would change. My criticism of that, however, is that after you're done with that section, the pictures go back to the way they were. I think it would have been far more interesting to have the pictures permanently changed, especially the one at the end of the hall, where it's just a painting of a woman smiling, and you take a picture of that painting, and how would you have described that smile? I would say more forced and fake.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't anything like, it didn't leave a lasting impression. It was just kind of like, whatever. It was, you could tell it was an attempt to be creepy. It was forced in that way.
I think in a better game, it would have been more creepy because of the amount of subtlety. I can appreciate it. Also, it was very obvious that in one section there was a mannequin. Fuck mannequins, by the way. I hate them. It was very obvious that everything was covered in these dust covers, these giant white sheets. And I went into a room, a sort of closet, and I watched the tape, and behind me there was a mannequin. And the mannequin disappeared, and it went over to an open doorway, which wasn't open before. And it was very clear that if I had removed all of the white covers, then the mannequin would have been there and would have started following me around. But because I skipped that entire section, it didn't do it. That's another criticism. There are sections where I stood still and Zach and I had an entire conversation and nothing happened. I was standing in front of the ghost and just talking to Zach about movie references, and nothing happened.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about the title?
I mean, there's not a ton to say about the title, because it's like, okay. I mean, it goes with the original idea of the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
On what the game's being sold on is like, it's this mansion up on the hill or whatever, and you're breaking into the place. And the game starts off, and yes, the mansion matters. It's like important or whatever to the introduction of the game. But I mean, once you get like a third of the way through the game, it has nothing to do with the house anymore. Like the house does not matter. It's completely irrelevant to any other part of the story. So it's just like, yeah, I imagine the name came from when they had. Okay, so like the impression I have is that they sat down before the game was made and they were like, we want to make this game and this is what we want it to be about. And they wrote up the description of the game based off of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I feel like they did the ghost section first. And then they realized just how much more game they had to go, expanding from there, and realized how much work it was going to be. And so they started cutting corners to make the work easier, to make the workload more manageable. And that's understandable. In the game design industry, it happens all the time. But they also didn't, like, alter anything else about the game to reflect that. They didn't alter the title. They didn't alter the description of what the experience was supposed to be. And so you have this thing called House on the Hill that's supposed to be this entire mystery within this mansion, and then none of that matters.
Mm-hmm.
So the name is kind of like, why is it called this if the house isn't important?
Yeah, I would have changed the title because, yeah, like you said, when I see House on the Hill, my mind goes, there's something wrong going on. It must be because of the house, because there's a little bit of an emphasis on the house being important, but I think I would have been more interested to see it take like an Amityville Horror or Rose Red approach, just to add a bit more relevance to having the house in the title.
Yeah, like there's nothing interesting about the location either, like the house itself. It's just like stuff is happening in the house. The house itself is like very just, I don't know. It just is what it is. Like there's not really much in the way of environmental storytelling. Like there's some here and there, but it's fairly weak and by the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, I mean, you turn around, you look at Resident Evil, for example, Biohazard. Most of the game takes place in, well, a good portion of the game. I shouldn't say most. A good portion of the game takes place in the house. It's a big fucking house. The house is very weird.
Yeah?
It's very strange. It's very weirdly laid out. Like, it's a weird location. It's an interesting location. There's all the weird shit going on both inside and just how the house is weird itself. And it's interesting in that way. This, no. It's just the stuff happening inside the house is weird. There's nothing about the house that is weird. So it, yeah. Just the name should have been changed to something else, where they should have just stuck with their original concept.
Yeah. I guess in conclusion, this game wasn't ready to be put into final product, and
No.
there's still a lot that needed to or could have been fixed, but just wasn't. Yeah, so I guess that just leaves the question of, do you have any closing comments?
Like, it definitely needs, I think it definitely needed more development time just to be more polished. Like, I still think the monster model is not good. It still looks very Play-Doh-y to me. And I honestly don't find it that scary. I am somewhat desensitized, but it doesn't look like gross. It only looks gross in the aspect of it has like too many arms. But it's like, okay, that's not, I don't know, like the monster doesn't look scary to me. It looks really out of place. It's too smooth, too clean, all that.
Yeah.
It's just that, I mean, it desperately needs focus. Like I mentioned in our last attempt to record this, that in reality, the amount of changes that would happen to this, that would need to be done to this game to like make it good, are too many to just do as updates. You'd have to scrap like sections of the game and just start over. So yeah. Yeah, I mean that picture's exactly what I'm talking about. It just looks so fake.
Yeah.
It doesn't look real in any way. And I'm not saying every monster needs to look realistic by any means, but I mean, it has to look convincing. I mean, this looks like, I think as I mentioned last time, it looks like cobbled together Unity assets. I obviously don't know what's going on behind the scenes with the development of the game, but I mean, it could use some kind of touching up to make it look a little bit more convincing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the game, it needs to be something specific, and it's just not that right now.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like I said, it's too much to change to just put out an update. It just needs to be it would have to be just a new game.